Welcome to the webinar, 6 Steps to be the Best Grandparent You Can Be. I'm Jennifer Crumans and I'm delighted to have you here with me. I see being a grandparent as a gift. I look forward to the day that I am one because I'm not there yet. I've been told that it is a time of hope, expectation, and overwhelming love. But I also know that an autism diagnosis and the pain that leads up to it can be really hard on you and on your family. I've lived that. It may seem as if hope disappears and that the road ahead is terrifying. I've lived that too. I hope that in our time here today, I can alleviate some of those fears and doubts that you may have as a grandparent of a grandchild with autism. And I hope that I can offer you some practical help in navigating this journey. As I said, I'm not yet a grandparent, but my husband and I have raised 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, and my son having autism. He's now 22 years old. And the information I'm going to share with you comes, of course, from our own experience, but also from the many, many stories that have been shared with me over the course of the last, I'd say 18 years. And also from the research that I did for my book when I wrote the book, The Autism and Grandparent Connection. I truly am humbled and I'm just honored to be invited into the lives of so many people. Their responses have given me a wider vision and a deeper respect for the role of grandparents, particularly grandparents who are on the autism journey, I call it, who live with or who spend time with a child with autism. I have learned through our own experience and then again through, like I said, others, that grandparents can make the journey so much better when we're raising our child, or to be perfectly honest, they can make it far more challenging. I would like to assure you, or I guess maybe reassure you, that there is hope for both you, your grandchild, and your family. What I will share with you will only make a difference if you allow yourself to really reflect on who you're being and how you're showing up for your family. It would be so easy to dismiss what I share as, something I already know, something that describes someone else, but not you. That's kind of the trap of self-development and learning. We have to realize that our brains, they like to be comfortable. Our brains don't like when we do things that are very different. They tell us that the information that we're hearing may somehow not pertain to us. That's a human condition. It's not a character flaw. So make the decision to be all in, to let what I say sink beyond your intellect and into your heart, and let it change the way you act and the way you show up for those you love and for yourself. Let's dive in to see what you need to know so you can take action immediately. Years ago, I learned from Jack Canfield, who's an American author, motivational speaker, entrepreneur, but also you might know him as the Chicken Soup for the Soul co-author. He taught this equation, E plus R equals O, which means that the event plus the response gives us an outcome. Too often, we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to change the event. That gets us nowhere except get frustrated in some situations. Autism is one of those circumstances. We can't change the diagnosis or the reality that our grandchild is different. An autism diagnosis is certainly painful. Watching helplessly as someone you love suffers can be incredibly challenging, but we have the power to change our response to it. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions, that's what's in our power, so that we have power to change the outcome. Being in this situation, our relationships, our own personal growth, the growth of our family, the happiness of each member of our family. So how will you show up for your family? Who will you be? What will you yourself learn? As a child, I loved watching Michael J. Fox in the show Family Ties. He's a Canadian-American actor, author, comedian, producer, more recently an activist. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's, a degenerative nervous disorder, at the age of 29. He was a person that I always admired, and so his experience and wisdom speaks so deeply to me. And I think that his ideas about Parkinson's and having to make other choices can really help us as we deal with autism. I'm also a voracious reader, and I really love learning from the wisdom of others. And one trait, or I guess the word is trait, my parents and later Jim Rohn, an American entrepreneur and author, inculcated in me was the necessity of taking personal responsibility. Again, we're reminded that we can't change the circumstances. Our grandchild has autism, but we can certainly change ourselves. And perhaps the biggest gift of our own son's autism was the opportunity, disguised as tragedy, to expand my skills, to grow as a wife, as a mother, as an educator, and a leader. But as you know, growth isn't comfortable. I'm not really a gardener. I think I'd like to be. But I do enjoy plants, and I have learned that when we transplant a plant, we need to nurture it and then be really patient while it gets accustomed to its new place. I think we're like that. Autism will definitely uproot us. It changes our expectations, our relationships, and even our sense of identity. A child with autism can really make us question our own ability to parent, to love unconditionally, to be useful even. But like transplanted plants, we need to be nurtured, fed, and patiently allow ourselves to grow. But first, before we grow, we have to uproot. And there are some beliefs that linger out there that even if they're not spoken, they are certainly undermining the well-being of children with autism and their families. Let's dig into 4 of those beliefs. A child with autism and his family do not need active grandparents. Poor parenting causes autism. Improved discipline will fix a child's autism. And autism is a life sentence of isolation, disability, and lost potential. I put red lights because these statements go nowhere. They stop us in our tracks. And I think that before we can move on, we need to really address them so that we can understand how we can deepen relationships and how we can move past the autism diagnosis. So first of all, grandparents are critical in the life of a child with autism. This fact has been absolutely and unequivocally shown over and over again, particularly because there's been a lot more research on top of just anecdotal evidence that families may learn to cope with the absence of grandparents. But the reality is that when grandparents play an active role in the family's life, not necessarily in close proximity, there are many grandparents who live far away and still play a role in the emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual health of the whole family, and elevate those. Grandparents are really, really important. I've lived the experience where they make a big difference. We know that there is nothing that parents can do to cause autism. Science has shed light on this very outdated belief. Neuroimaging tools have shown that there are structural and functional differences in the brain. A brain with autism is wired differently in addition to the genetic basis of the brain development in individuals with autism. These brain-based differences help to explain why people on the spectrum have unique abilities, why they struggle with social communication, emotional regulation, and why they have restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviors, interests. There is absolutely nothing a parent could do or not do to cause autism. Very often, grandparents are less than impressed by the choices that their adult children make about discipline, and they believe that somehow corporal punishment will fix a child's autism behaviors. I wish I could spend a whole day on this topic alone. With every fiber of my being, for reasons that I can only touch on here, I assure you that hitting, yelling, threatening, or spanking a child with autism is experienced as nothing short of horror for them. Because of the way the brain receives information and then processes it, the chances for real learning to come from being spanked is just below zero. It's not possible. Yes, the child may not repeat the behavior, but I can promise you that damage is done at a neurological level in terms of the amygdala's response to and fear, and the relationship is damaged. And that will far outweigh any so-called good behavior. We have many ways now of changing behavior, particularly in in children with severe behavior problems or with autism. We have the tools, and there are certainly professionals happy to help and to give answers. What I must say to you is that corporal punishment adds a lot of fear and anxiety to a world that is experienced as very fearful all the time. And again, I wish I could spend a whole day on that, but for the purposes of this webinar, it is just not a good idea whatsoever in terms of dealing with a child with autism. On the other hand, I do agree that quite often we need to increase our expectations, have firmer, more consistent rules and guidelines and consequences. And that would go a long way to improving the lives of our kids with autism. In no way do I propose that we not be strict and have high expectations and that we teach good behavior. Absolutely. What I need to, or I guess what I'm probably hammering home, is that some of the methods that we might use for a child who does not have autism do more harm than good for our kids with ASD. And lastly, over the course of the last 20 years, I guess, I have witnessed people with autism develop their full potential and live a life that's rich with purpose and relationships. I do believe that it takes a whole lot of work, love, forgiveness, and a lot of growth on everyone's part. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and I think that is particularly true for our children with autism. But it is totally possible. What may have to change is our own vision of what a happy, fulfilled life is. I think that sometimes we impose our own ideas of happiness and fulfillment when that might not be what will be happy and fulfilling for a person, for anybody, whether they have autism or not. So now it's time for action. We've got the myths. We know 4 beliefs that are not useful. And so now I want to look at some actions you can take to promote a deeper relationship with your adult child and your grandchild, to give you the power to make life more manageable and pleasurable for your children and your grandchild, and to help enhance the whole family's ability to cope, including your own. I've chosen the word relate, and I realize it's spelled wrong. I needed the 2 L's, so forgive me for my misspelling. The teacher in me is screaming at that misspelling. The first R in the acronym stands for reach out. Reach out to your family. So often I hear of families that fear and doubt and a sense of the unknown has kept the grandparents at arm's length from the family. Sometimes grandparents aren't sure how to interact with or deal with their grandchild's behavior. So it keeps them from maybe babysitting or interacting. For some kids with autism, they have speech and communication challenges, and it might be hard to interact with the grandchild. It's even been shared with me that some grandparents refuse to even be alone with the child, or they only spend time with the non-autistic grandchildren. Others have reported that they told the parents of the child that they were able to raise children without their parents' help, so therefore they were going to leave their children on their own. And in the case of raising a child with autism, I assure you this is very different than raising children who do not have autism. The point here is that I encourage you to avoid cocooning or playing it safe. Acknowledge the trepidation that you feel and seek out the help from the parents or autism professionals to help you learn what you need to know. Even if you don't know what to say or how to say it or what to do, I am a firm believer that just being honest And saying that at least shows that you're willing and you want to learn. Just reach out and be involved in the life of your grandchild and figure it out as you go with the help of webinars such as this or other resources. I'm always here. I love getting questions and I will do my best to answer them. We will talk a little bit later about how you can reach out to me as well. Brene Brown is a research professor at the University of Houston. She's spent the past 16 years studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. In families that have a child with autism, these are topics that can't be ignored if we want to deepen relationships, gain a greater sense of purpose in our grandchildren's lives. Brown teaches us that empathy fuels connection by feeling with people. Feeling the pain without pretending that it doesn't exist or glossing over it or trying to fix the pain. Choosing empathy is a vulnerable choice because in order to connect with you or to your grandchild, you have to connect with something in yourself that knows what that other person is feeling. And connecting with that hurts. It's very rarely pleasant. Empathy calls for us to get out of ourselves, to see with the eyes of your grandchild or your adult child, to listen with their ears, and to feel what they might feel. There really is no place in empathy for me because my heart and mind are in your experience. And it seems so obvious that empathy is what we need to show and be, and yet it can be really hard. And I know as a parent, it was very hard at times when my son was having a meltdown in a mall and everyone was looking at me. It would take deliberate thought to put myself in his position and to ignore the other people around me. But I think that Brene's words speak so perfectly for raising a child with autism. Empathy is seeing with the eyes of the other, listening with ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. Our children with autism need us to do that, and the adult children who are raising these children need it as well. So how do we put into practice being empathetic? One of the most basic human needs is to be heard, deeply heard. According to the renowned Stephen Covey, emphatic listening is listening with the intent to understand, seeking first to understand, to really understand, as opposed to being understood. It's an entirely different paradigm, and I must admit that it's something I have worked on and continue to work on and probably will continue to work on. It is a very needed skill in our world and yet probably highly underused. In emphatic listening, you listen with your ears, but you also, and more importantly, you listen with your eyes, with your heart. You listen for someone's feeling, for the meaning. You listen for behavior. You listen with your right brain as well as your rational, logical left brain. You sense, you intuit, you feel. You have to open yourself up to be influenced. And so often we approach conversations not to be influenced. And I am very guilty of this. We approach conversations where we are going to tell our thoughts, share our feelings, our input, but we often don't want our minds to be changed. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's just kind of our human nature. So in emphatic listening, we get inside another person's frame of reference. You look out through it. You see the world the way they see the world, and you understand their paradigm. You understand how they feel. Interestingly enough, Covey and Brene Brown both speak about empathy being critical. And I certainly would say that in the world we're living in, that is becoming more and more obvious. You don't have to use the word empathy to make a statement that shows empathy. You may want to, for example, if you're speaking to your adult child, you want to ask questions so that you're letting them speak, getting inside of their heads. And you might want to ask questions that are open-ended, such as, what are you finding most challenging? And then tell me more. And then really listening and not interrupting. That's a skill that's very tough for many of us. Asking perhaps, like, when does it hurt the most? Or what are you telling yourself that might be unkind? We're in this together and I want to be a support for you. How can I help? The reason that those words are bolded is because they are good questions that open up conversation. When we ask questions that start with the word why or do you, they tend to be closed. They tend to lead to an answer. In order to listen emphatically, we want to be able to dig in and truly understand where the person is. And it really helps a person who is dealing, I can speak from my own experience. I didn't understand all the feelings and all of the thought. I didn't have time to even think about what I was thinking about as a parent. And so having somebody ask me questions and then just let me talk with no judgment, no interruption, and then just say, tell me more. It's as if almost a pressure cooker was relieved. I was able to kind of hear myself and figure out what was bothering me or what was, or solve problems even. Just, I would almost hear my own answers. And it's a coaching model, but it's just such an appropriate model for helping that it's certainly worth looking more into. If it's something that interests you and you feel that you're perhaps not a great listener, then this, I would definitely look up emphatic listening and Stephen Covey. And there are many others, of course, but he's my go-to. So then the next L, I had to have those two in there, is learning about autism. Given that you're still engaged in this webinar as well, I guess it's safe to say that I'm preaching to the choir. What I would add to the fact that you're trying to build your knowledge, your credibility, and your skills is that you don't need to be an expert per se, but rather a keen observer and a detective of your own grandchild's autism. Watching our grandkids can give us so much information about them and what makes them tick, what they like, what they dislike, what skills they need. Where could you perhaps help? Not by doing something for them, but by teaching them how with support. I suggest that learning how behavior is a way for your grandchild to communicate is an essential skill. Learning how to play with your grandchild. I know it sounds weird because it plays intuitive in most kids, but not in children with autism. Learning how to teach a skill, learning how to cope with a meltdown. These are all tools that will be useful in your toolbox. I will certainly be presenting videos on these topics as we go along, but it's essential that you dig deeper on these topics because they are really, really helpful for you as a grandparent so that you can interact and just gain competence and that feeling of confidence. You will have a special relationship with your grandchild, but and you will develop your own personal style. But I would suggest that there are definitely things you need to know about how kids with ASD learn and how they interact and how they play, that it will really make your relationship far more productive, I guess, and build a rapport with your grandchild. It's really essential that you dig deeper and again, go to the resources online in your community, to books, to conferences. Again, I would love to be a source of that information. I will continue to. I often will make videos or blogs or articles or webinars based on your questions. So keep sending them to me because I really get a lot from that. And there are some practical tools that cares for somebody with autism needs to understand. These are non-negotiables. Routines. You need to know how to create routines and schedules, how to create checklists for your grandchild. Visuals that help to show the picture of what's about to happen, or even in words. Visuals can be words as well, but it gives our kids predictability, and it calms the anxious nervous system that they live with. We need to know how to organize, how to help them to organize and to set things up in their environment so that they can find things on their own and become as independent as possible. We also need to know how to set up calm environments and to provide those. Choices are incredibly important when it comes to kids with ASD. For example, 2 to 3 choices is maximum for most. I was going to say children, but I actually have friends who are adults with autism, and they tell me that 2 to 3 choices is enough for them as well. Knowing the sensory tools and how to use them, and the transition tools and how to use them. Again, these are things that I will do. I do just small videos on blogs, my Toolbox Tuesdays on Facebook. So I'm not going to get into them here, but this is a toolbox that I think is something grandparents should be really, really familiar with, so that you can interact and build relationship with your grandchild. As I mentioned earlier, I am inspired by Michael J. Fox. And what I learned from watching him deal with his Parkinson's diagnosis was how my unhappiness often arose from frustrated expectations. I found this really eye-opening, that unconscious expectations I had of myself as a mother, as a woman, as a wife. When I realized that I couldn't do it all and be all those expectations that I held deep inside for my son, that's where a lot of my pain came from. And so, as Michael says, my happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and inverse proportion to my expectations. Now, I do not mean that you should lower your expectations for your grandchildren, not in the least. But perhaps it's our own expectations about what our grandchild will produce or who they will be, and especially in relation to us. An example of that is, it can be really hurtful when your grandchild, this beloved child, does not want to hug you. And we have an expectation of being snuggled and hugged by our grandkids, whether that's spoken or not. And part of accepting autism is that their little nervous systems, and I shouldn't say little because it works with adults as well, their nervous systems are different than ours. And we can't impose, it's unfair to impose our expectations on them when they don't live in the same sort of, well, I'm not even sure what the word is. They don't live the same as we do. And again, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is, and there's got to be a way through it. So if your grandchild won't hug you, then perhaps maybe the two of you could create a little secret handshake together, or you could talk to your grandchild about what way they would like to show love. And it's funny because we just assume that hugs are love, but if someone is physically uncomfortable with a hug, that's not really love to impose that on them. So accepting and affirming is hard. It's so easy to say that, but it is definitely a really hard task when you have these expectations of what your grandchild will be. I think that Michael modeled how to move from a place of resignation and disappointment and hurt to a place of accepting the reality of what was, and then working with that. Michael, in his case, chose to use his energy, his fame, and his power to advocate for Parkinson's and a cure. As grandparents and parents, we certainly have an advocacy role in the world of autism, but I personally believe that our primary role is to love and serve the child that we've been given, first and foremost. That child needs unconditional acceptance and unconditional advocacy. Not so that they change, but so that the supports are in place so that they can grow and develop. I know that you love your grandchild. The fact that you're listening to this, and if you're still on here, well, then that's proof. What I also know is that children are like sponges and they soak up all that's happening and being said around them on a physical, intellectual, and emotional levels. They're trying to learn and understand the world around them. And the most important thing to them is gaining love and affection from their caregivers. They don't yet have this worldly or experienced understanding of human behavior or why people behave in the ways they do. The bottom line is kids' main goal is to be loved. And this, of course, is what every child deserves. They learn very early if mommy and daddy are happy, then they themselves are happier too, and they get more of that love that they need. Our kids with autism are no different. They want peace and love and harmony in their lives, and they need it to thrive emotionally. But we're all aware that autism is dysregulating for everyone involved. The years leading up to that diagnosis and the years following it are fraught with strong emotions, struggle as parents and actually as a whole family learn to meet the needs of the child. We can say all the loving things we want to our grandchildren, but subconsciously they will read into our fears, our anger, our exhaustion, and our conflicts. And what's really sad is that, and I see it all the time in education, was the conclusion that they come up with is that they are the cause. And this is so true for children with autism. Even I've seen even very significantly impaired children with autism still take on ownership of all of the strife that's around them. If in their minds, it's as if they're saying, if only I was a better kid, this wouldn't be happening. If I did better in school, if I could just, do these things on my own, my parents wouldn't fight. So accepting your grandchild is being aware that your words and your actions, they have to match. If you say that that child is wonderful and that you just love them, that they're wonderful the way they are, then be careful about what else you say. Things that make them think that you're trying to fix them or dismiss, even just dismissing the child is dangerous to them. If we react or we talk as if we want them to be more of what we want them to be, sometimes we can fall into the trap of talking about them as if they don't understand. And I can assure you, after 26 years in education, our children and our children with autism do understand. What is the problem is they don't understand at an adult level, so they create their own meaning. It is imperative that we seek help, we seek the tools and the strategies to help our kids, but without the idea that somehow it's going to be better once they're a certain way. And this, again, is not easy stuff. I wish I had clear cut, do this, don't do that. And certainly there are some things like that, but not in this webinar, because this webinar reaches into the heart of the matter, which I think is where we need to start. The T in relate means teach skills. And I would say be prepared to learn new ones. Grandparents are in a perfect position to teach some of those things that parents are either too frustrated, exhausted, or busy to teach. My children learn from their grandparents a whole variety of skills. How to blow your nose, wait in line by playing a game in your mind, drink water even when you rather would not, plant a garden, catch a fish, cut toast in what we call toast fingers, by the way. The list could go on and on. It was funny as I was thinking about all the things my parents and my in-laws have taught my children. It is remarkable how much they've given them. On a deeper level, the grandparents that I have had in my experience, my own and others, and the other people's, is that they modeled tenacity, resilience, the gift of faith, prayer, hard work. These are all things that you may remember when you're parenting, that it's hard to be all the things you want to be. And I think grandparents have this incredible position to model and fill in those things that their parents can't. Or like I said, they might just be too darn tired or worn out or trying to manage too many things. Grandparents can also be prepared to mentor skills that are lacking rather than perhaps standing in judgment. Why can't he do this? Why can't he do that? I would say roll up your sleeves and let's learn how to teach it. But in order to teach someone with autism, as I have said, it is important to know some of the skills. And this is going to be quite different in some ways than the way you taught your children. And it is really important to seek out that information by your learning, by your reading. And again, come back to me, ask questions. I will help in any way there. But on the other hand, there's something else to consider. I think our children can teach us a lot when we join the child in their world, doing whatever it is they seem to enjoy doing. Grandparents have reported that building towers and breaking them was what they spent their time doing, spinning marbles, checking out vacuum cleaner stores, reading about Minecraft or playing Minecraft. My parents learned many of their social media skills by my kids. Grandparents may learn how to game, how to build a Lego structure, or play with Thomas the Tank Engine. And on a deeper level, I think our kids with ASD can teach us how to slow down, to be truly present in a moment, and to notice things in nature that we might miss because they pick up on things that the rest of the world does not. Grandparents have such a unique opportunity, I think in general, but even more importantly when we have a grandchild with autism, because we can fill in the gaps and we can help to learn the skills and the things that we see a child struggling with rather than waiting for somebody else to teach them. Yes, we may need help to know how to teach them, but that is something we can seek and then move forward. And lastly, something that's very near and dear to my heart is the expectation of growth. And I used a quote from Temple Grandin. Mother knew that she had to stretch and lovingly push me just outside of my comfort zone so I could develop to my fullest. I think of the fact that Temple Grandin was being raised in the 50s, and her mother, who is a hero to me, Eustacia Cutler, did what would have been impossible, I think, at that time. She kept her child out of institutions. She persevered against outdated, or I guess it wasn't outdated at the time, but we have since learned it was outdated science. She was against a system and yet carved a path for me as a mother and countless others to have high expectations of our children, to accept them as they are, to work with the gifts and the talents and the strengths they have, to just love the person that we've been given. Those words by Temple Grandin. I guess I should mention, in case you don't know who she is, she's an autism advocate. She's a woman with autism. She's an animal science professor and the best-selling author of many books, but the one that is quoted here is from The Loving Push, which I would love every parent and grandparent to read. Temple Grandin and her co-author, Dr. Moore, are very clear in that book that we are not doing our kids any favors by sheltering them from discomfort or struggle or challenge. We owe it to them to expect growth with our help. That part is the key. Yes, kids with autism have very real weaknesses that can't be ignored, but they also have gifts that should be identified and developed. We can't know these gifts if a child is protected, quote unquote, from experiencing life and activities. It's hard. Taking our son to swimming, taking our son to church, taking our son to restaurants, actually everywhere was a struggle because it was pushing him outside of his autism comfort zone. And it did challenge him. And that is so hard to get our heads around as parents, to actually push our children. But in the long run, by providing the support and learning the skills we needed in order to support these, I guess, nudges into the outside world, helped him to find himself and to discover talents such as music, such as swimming, things that he would have known if we didn't push him to a certain extent and allow him to feel frustrated and to deal with the emotions that came with that. So how can we raise our expectations and lovingly push our grandchildren with autism? I think, again, grandparents are in a perfect position because you can help provide new experiences. Just for example, my dad used to take our kids out, and my son included, on professional development days, and they went for lunch. And while that might have been very enjoyable to the other kids, it was a tougher one for our son, dealing with the noise, the smells, the confusion. Of course, he always loved his McDonald's food, but it was never, I don't think, easy. Plans for supports will have to be provided. My parents were really good at asking me what he would need and then using them. Different tools, different strategies, such as first then schedules, some fidget toys, earplugs, lots of different little tools that you learn over the years and by asking. I think that grandparents can model persistence and patience and grit like no other. Grandparents have so much that they can offer in terms of expecting growth that it makes me excited to think of the potential the kids have when they are supported by loving grandparents. So these actions taken together give us a starting point in our response to autism. Of course, this only touches the surface, and it may seem just like common sense, and it is. There's nothing earth-shattering here. However, I assure you that sometimes in the heat of the interactions or the speed of life, I guess, we tend to resort to our defaults, to what is most comfortable. However, deepening the relationships and navigating the emotional storm that's going to happen when a family has a child with autism, these actions are a critical step in the right direction. Certainly, misguided beliefs, assumptions, and lack of understanding can damage relationships at a time when we're already fragile, and this does nothing to help a child. So just to review, we need to relate to our family, and this provides the foundation for building relationships, managing stress and heartbreak, reaching out, empathizing, listening empathically, learning about autism, affirming and you're loving your grandchild and adult children, teaching skills and being open to learning new ones, expecting growth and development. This is the legacy that you can give for your family. And I say with huge respect to my own children's grandparents, that legacy lives on. And it is remarkable to be able to share this webinar at a point where my son is now an adult and able to articulate the gift of his grandparents. I love this quote by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. If we make our goal to live a life of compassion and unconditional love, then the world will indeed become a garden where all kinds of flowers can bloom and grow. Our grandchildren with autism may be different flowers than you expected, but they're beautiful flowers, and our world needs them. I mean this with all sincerity. The challenges are there. I can't gloss over that. It's not an easy road, but I believe that it is a road that is so well worth traveling. And it is a road that definitely needs a whole family to travel together. So the potential that you hold is life-changing, and I want to help. I want to support you on the journey. I want to offer you any tools that I've got. Your learning is definitely going to be lifelong. I applaud you if you got to this point in the webinar. I sincerely applaud you because many people start and they get partway through and they tell themselves they know it and they stop. And that's precisely where you are making a difference, because you're persisting, you're sticking it out, you're willing to be open, to ponder, to reflect. So be sure to send me feedback on today's webinar. I want to know what you took away, what actions, what changes in behavior, what will you want to do with this information? What will you keep doing that you recognize, wow, I'm already doing that, and because I think you need to see what you're doing well as well. Let me know what that is. And of course, please send me questions. You fuel my way of helping. You help me to know what you need, and I will provide to the best of my ability. I would love to continue the journey with you. So here are a few ways. You can stay up to date on my email list so that you don't miss any articles, blogs, or upcoming trainings. You can find that email list on my Facebook, on Facebook, Autism Aspirations. And I just realized I have to check if it's on Autism Grandparents on Facebook. But you can sign up for an email there. You can sign up for my email on my website. You could definitely read the Autism Aspirations book to dig in, Autism and Grandparent book to dig a little deeper on autism and learn about how to help and what is not helpful. At the same time, I have a complimentary ebook when you buy a softcover book. That's because shipping costs drive me crazy, and so this is my way of trying to make up for those. And then I am beyond excited to be offering my long-awaited Grandparent online course, which will be coming up in the spring. In fact, I'm offering an early bird coupon, which will give a $100 discount to those who register early. So be sure to be on my email list for that coupon. And lastly, if you're looking for more personal or private help, then my coaching packages would be a perfect fit. Try a free half-hour consultation or coaching session to see if this is the best way for you to learn how to be the best grandparent you can be for your beloved grandchild. So reach out to me at autismaspirations.com or on Facebook at Autism Aspirations and Autism Grandparent. And I thank you because you stuck it out, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'm really excited about your journey, and I want to share it with you and help out in any way that I can. I wish you the very best. Thank you. Take care.